from Tel Aviv, the top stories this hour. A threat to all member states. The European Union slams Lebanon's Hezbollah for threatening to attack Cyprus. Israel is losing the war in Gaza and we must take advantage. Hamas welcomes the comments by the IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari. And over 1,000 people now confirmed dead amid soaring temperatures on the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. First, Hamas officials are declaring that Israel has lost the war in Gaza. This a day after the IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said in an interview with Israeli media that the group could not be defeated. In Doha, where he met Iran's acting foreign policy chief, the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh called for Israel's enemies to join together and take advantage. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, meanwhile, reacted with fury to those comments by Daniel Hagari. Take a listen.
We are at war on several fronts, and we face great challenges and difficult decisions. Therefore, I must demand that all coalition partners get a grip and rise to the occasion. This is not time for petty politics. This is not the time for legislation that endangers the coalition, which is fighting for victory over our enemies. We must all focus solely on the tasks before us, defeating Hamas, returning our hostages, and returning our residents safely to their homes.
Backing the Biden administration for delaying weapons shipments. I mean, what did you make of the timing of that?
It's called, in tennis they call it an unforced error. This was a big unforced error, totally unnecessary. And the idea, that it really blindsided the administration, which doesn't have any love for the Netanyahu coalition anyhow. It really was just a really poor. The only thing I can think of was political, that he was pandering to Ben-Gvir and Smotrich to do that. But the relationship, this needs to be nurtured. Israel is dependent upon the United States for many things, not just in the short term, but certainly in the medium term and maybe the long term. And this is not the time during this to look for other fights. There are plenty of disagreements that will happen.
And, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been invited to speak before Congress next month. What are your expectations there?
It's funny, in 2014, Israel's defense minister asked me if Bibi should go, and I said no. I said the timing was bad. I'm not sure the time.
The Lebanese government, meanwhile, is trying to head off a diplomatic crisis with Cyprus after Hezbollah threatened to attack the island. We'll have more on that in just a few moments. Let's get the latest, though, on the fighting between the IDF and the Iranian-backed terrorist group. Our Zach Andrews joins us now from the north of Israel. So, Zach, the IDF says it killed another senior Hezbollah commander today. What do we know about this individual?
Yeah, this is Fadl Ibrahim, was killed in an alleged drone strike in the Deir Kifa area, which is about 8.5 miles parallel with Kiryat Shmona inside Lebanese territory. It's, again, a recurring story throughout the last 8 months of this conflict that the IDF has been targeting field operatives of Hezbollah. Now,
well, the European Union, meanwhile, has warned that Hezbollah's threats to Cyprus represent a threat to every member state. This a day after the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, accused Nicosia of taking part in military drills with Israel. The Cypriot Prime Minister responded by saying his country was not a part of the Middle East conflict. Take a listen.
Cyprus must be warned that opening Cypriot bases and airports to the Israelis to target Lebanon means that the Cypriot government has become part of the war, and the resistance will deal with it as if it is part of the war.
The Republic of Cyprus is not involved in any way in the hostilities. The Republic of Cyprus is not part of the problem. The Republic of Cyprus is part of the solution, and our role, as it was manifested, for example, through the humanitarian corridor, is recognized not only by the Arab world, but the entire international community. The statements are not pleasant, and they do not correspond to the truth. In the attempt to present an image of Cyprus being involved in military operations under
Yaakov Lapin, military and strategic affairs analyst at the Miriam Institute, the Jewish News Syndicate and the Alma Centre. Eric Mandel remains with us as well. Yaakov, thanks for being with us. So nobody saw that coming, did they? Hezbollah directly threatening to attack Cyprus. What do you make of it?
Well, look, I think, we're at the stage where Nasrallah is essentially telling Israel and the region what will happen if war breaks out. And he's signaling to everybody. It's a kind of warning. So he's telling the Cypriots, look, Hezbollah has noticed the military alliance that has been in place between Israel and Cyprus, Israel and Greece, the Mediterranean alliance. Israel trains on a regular basis in Cyprus, Israeli forces, ground forces, air forces, and in Greece. Could that not
be at risk, in your view?
I don't think that that's at risk because this is an interest-based alliance, and the Cypriots and the Greeks have a lot to gain from this military cooperation from Israel. In fact, they've been very concerned by Turkish aggression, and that's one of the reasons why I think they've been moving closer to Israel over the years. I think that what Nasrallah has been saying is, look, we know that Cyprus could act as a backup port, and I'm not talking about a military port, I'm talking about a backup civilian port, not a naval base, but a port for getting goods into Israel if Israeli seaports come under fire.
Moving on to other news now. The United States says it killed a senior ISIS official in a strike on Syria earlier this week. According to America's allies, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, the strike occurred in Turkish-controlled territory. The US named the ISIS suspect as Usama Jamal al-Janabi. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Michael Pregent, foreign policy and national security consultant and a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, and himself a former US soldier who served in Iraq. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Michael. So, first of all, how common are these strikes, and is fighting ISIS still a priority for the US, given everything else that's happening in the region right now?
Yeah, I think. Thanks for having me. I think the US can always focus on ISIS as far as hitting them, no matter what the U.S. is doing in the region. The one thing we are willing to do is target a foreign terrorist organization like ISIS anywhere they pop up. We need to also have that same strategy when it comes to Hamas and other groups, because they're also foreign terrorist organizations. What concerns me about this is, once again, we see a NATO ally, Turkey, targeting U.S. allies, meaning they are against the Syrian, the forces that the U.S. put together, specifically the YPG in northern Syria. And we see another ISIS fighter along with other al-Qaeda operatives operating in Turkish-controlled territory. You know, why is our NATO ally not more concerned about ISIS and al-Qaeda than they are with Kurdish soldiers that are working with the U.S. ISIS fighters? Now, we have to also be careful what we label an ISIS fighter. When Assad's forces or when the YPG says these guys are ISIS fighters, a lot of times it's just Sunni military-age males that were under ISIS control. So to say that there are 20,000 ISIS fighters in a prison, they're not all ISIS fighters. And what Brett McGurk set up about 3 years ago was that Iraq would be able to handle them by condemning some to death or putting some in prisons. And once they get into the Iraqi judicial system, a lot of them are disappeared. A lot of them are executed. And the intel or the information is not where it needs to be. An international court needs to oversee what Iraq is doing, because they'll basically go off two sworn statements from two undisclosed individuals that will say Muhammad is an ISIS fighter, and they'll send them to death within seconds. And that creates more instability in the Sunni areas of Iraq and Syria, and it allows groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda to recruit Iraqis that believe they're being disenfranchised or simply targeted because they're Sunni.
You're not getting rid of an ideology. You are degrading its military capabilities. And when you put them on the defensive, you can target isolated ISIS or al-Qaeda targets. Same thing is going to happen in Gaza, but the relationship in Gaza is probably closer to what Israel's been doing in the West Bank, every day going in and extracting terrorists, having operations, and there really is a template for managing Gaza in phase 4. All
right, Eric Mandel, thank you very much. We're going to welcome back. Canada has listed Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organisation. It follows years of lobbying by the Canadian opposition, along with some members of the Iranian diaspora. Iran has called the move unwise. For more on that.